Most black people ignore the fact that the history we've been taught has been taught by those that have brutalized us throughout history. Brutalizers never teaches true history to those they brutalized. They instead always teaches them a false version of history that makes the brutalizers appear lesser brutal throughout history than they truly were. Most black people also totally ignores the fact that all information that we receive comes not only from those that have brutalized us throughout history, but also from a group of people that have demonstrated an almost total disregard for the human lives of non-whites throughout history. Their subjugation, murder, and exploitation of all other races are unparalleled. There has never been a time in human history where which our oppressors have not either exploited millions of people and have contributed either directly or indirectly to the misery, suffering, exploitation, and deaths of millions. While labeling all other groups as being savages, our oppressors have in fact been the most brutally savage throughout history. These are facts they brainwash millions of us to forget. More importantly, these are the people who are the programmers of everything that we now believe. Whenever everything that we believe comes from such a type of people, they'll always feed us mental enslaving lies. It's the people they are. It's the way they've always been, and it's the only way they know how to be. They've indoctrinated lots of mental enslaving lies into our minds. And those black people who do not critically think nor ever questions the validity of their established beliefs never notices their mental chains. Many black people are afraid to think for themselves. They're scared to look at facts, so they never have to admit to themselves that they might be wrong in their beliefs. Many see what they want to see and believe what they want to believe and fight vigorously to defend those beliefs, regardless of how ridiculously absurd those beliefs may be. Those of us that do wake up does so because we finally stopped agreeing to believe in things that literally insults our own intelligence. The truth does matter for the oppressed. The oppressed must gain a clear, concise, and accurate understanding of our plight and condition in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings are flawed, then all of our liberating remedies and strategies that stem from those flawed understandings will also be flawed. This is why those of us who know the truth of our plight and condition must teach African proverb. Our plight has nothing to do with a biblical fairy tale written by our most ungodliest enemies. And our condition has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth, which presents what would in fact be the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people. Those noted beliefs are held by those among us that are ignorant. Whenever people are ignorant, nonsense always makes perfect sense. The truth of the matter is that the Bible and the Willie Lynch letter are both false knowledge. An ignorant mind that has been fed false knowledge is far worse off than an ignorant mind alone, because an ignorant mind alone might continue to seek the truth that ultimately frees him. But an ignorant mind that has been fed false knowledge, believing that it's true, stops searching for the truth that frees him, and therefore becomes mentally enslaved by the false knowledge. False knowledge literally makes its believers act as their own wardens of their own mental prison. This is precisely why white oppressive forces have embedded those false knowledge into our collective minds. They mentally enslaves us. And mental slavery is the worst form of slavery because it causes its victims to make enemies of those who are trying to free their minds. Here's the truth of our plight and condition. Unlike at the conclusion of World War II, When the less than 12-year Jewish Holocaust ended and the U.S. government and the United Nations contributed massive financial support to rebuild their lives, there was no moral obligation to do the same for we Africans. Although the African Holocaust lasted many hundreds of years longer and resulted in millions of more deaths, when slavery was abolished, the U.S., the UK, and many other white nations that benefited greatly from their brutal exploitation of Africa and Africans felt no moral obligation to do the same for us, to restore our culture, restore our lives. They instead did the opposite. You see, the white society's exploitation of Africans has provided it with an era of which it has flourished most throughout history. To allow this era to end would be directly against the interests of the white society, especially given that the white society's dependence on Africa's natural resources is forever. The white society therefore instead socialized Africans to think in ways that allows the white society to continue its exploitation and subjugation of the black population without any significant black resistance. Socialized is when the oppressors exploit their monopoly over information that are fed into the collective minds of the oppressed, to manipulate the oppressed to think and behave in ways that are against their own interests and instead in ways serving their oppressors. This is all possible because regardless of how intelligent people are, it is possible to control the information that they receive. It's entirely possible to control what they'll believe. People are like computers. All you have to do is keep repeatedly feeding them certain information. And over time, you can persuade an entire generation towards an applied objective. Most people will respond accordingly to the information because they've all been repeatedly given the same disinformation. The repetition of false information leads to non-deliberate, thoughtful decision-making or decisions below the level of consciousness. It has been called thinking without thinking, and it ultimately leads to unconscious similar behaviors and ways of thinking. White social scientists describe what they've done to us as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of the black population that makes us adhere to the authority and existing infrastructure of the white dominant society. There are three ways to effectively socialize the minds of an entire generation of people: by what they're taught, by what they see, by what they hear, and through repetition. Because white oppressive forces control the education we're taught, the media images we see, and the narratives that we hear, these combined factors through repetition allow them to socialize the minds of millions of black people to think in ways that are beneficial to their white society and in ways that are against our own self-interest. It's a true reason why many of us are self-hating and revere the white society in spite of a brutal history to the contrary. Those of us who tell you the truth are trying to free you from a mental prison that you don't even know you're trapped within. It is time to wake up to our reality. It is time to stop believing in things that insult our intelligence. We must gain an accurate understanding of our plight and condition to develop the proper counter strategies that are required in order to liberate ourselves. We've been socialized, and they begin socializing us through our education development. After we complete our education, we are socialized through media subliminal programming. It's constantly being reinforced upon our minds. This is how the white society protects itself from massive unified black retribution. Brothers and sisters, time to wake up. One love and peace.